Never has a game been able to immediately grab my attention with the use of such spectacular notes like Shadow of the Colossus did. The game wastes no time putting the player into the right mindset to prepare themselves for the journey ahead of them. A journey of self-reflection, morals, questions of who is the true monster, the colossi you're asked to fight and take down, all on purpose of bringing back a girl whose relations to you are almost completely left ambiguous? Or are you, the player, for intruding on these innocent creatures' lands and mercilessly killing them, one by one, for a self-driven motivation? Of course, the player is supposed to ask themselves this, question why exactly they need to kill 16 innocent, yet massive, creatures. And at the center of all this pondering are the Forbidden Lands, the map the player is given, and where the story takes place. Now when the game released, both the PS2 and PS4 remake, the game was met by critical success. On both instances, critics praised the game for its technological innovation, pushing the original PS2's hardware to its limits, and for being a prime example of how video games can be a true art form thanks to its story, gameplay, art direction, and its ability to give introspection to the player. At a time where the debate over whether video games were at its highest, when games were in the political space for being too violent, Shadow of the Colossus was a golden nugget found in a mineshaft of toxic debates. However, despite its critical success, not everyone seemed to agree on just how great the game was, when it came to user reviews at least. Don't get me wrong, the reception was still overwhelmingly positive, but it seemed clear that it failed to grab certain audiences. Now, as to be expected, no game is made for everyone, you can't have your cake and eat it too and all that. Some arguments were fair. The camera was bad, you always find yourself fighting it, making it difficult to focus on what you're doing. The controls are awkwardly placed, what is this? And some people just simply couldn't relate to the story, which is totally fair. Like I said, the game doesn't strike at the heart for some people than it does for others. Now, as much as it would please me to do a fully fledged critical analysis on this game, because honestly I can go on forever about how the controls were specifically designed the way it was to fit the narrative, even the camera to some extent. Anyways, getting too far ahead of myself. I specifically want to address the comments made about the game's map, the Forbidden Lands. Some people criticize the map for missing with certain elements, like how there's a clear lack of NPC or game vendors, while there's nothing overtly interesting within the map, or while all you do is run around, collect fruit, pray at shrines, go from A to B, Colossus to Colossus with very little in between. These people particularly seem ticked by this. Like I said, not everyone was going to understand what this game was trying to do, and that's not immediately to the fault of their own. But seeing these comments, these went beyond than simply not understanding it. They seem to despise the game because of this. They absolutely hate it and bash it for not having what they expect out of a game. And that's why I intend to explain in this video. Okay, admittedly, I'm biased as fuck when it comes to this game, I realize that, and you probably have to consider I'm still giving you the context and background for this video. But if I really want to, I can simply just say fuck you, end the video right there, and save me another 30 minutes of trying to explain why I think these negative user reviews are unfair. But I'm not going to do that. No. To do this, I'm going to break the video down into 3 segments. The context given to us within the game's narrative, the player experience when roaming the map, whether that be straying your way to another Colossus or simply exploring the dead wastelands, or the intentional artistic choices made by Team Maiko, the developers of the game. I want everyone to understand this isn't going to be a bashing of the people who made those comments. Far from it. My goal for this video is to point out all the reasons why Shadow of the Colossus map was designed the way it was supposed to get out of the player and vice versa. And hopefully by the time you've ended this video, I've convinced you to try out the game for a second time, with a more open mind. But if you still end up disagreeing with me, or more favorably, you understand my points but still don't feel like the game is made for you, that's fine. That's fine, no game is made for everyone, at least of all Shadow of the Colossus. I would just been happy you took time to consider my points. By the way, I forgot to mention, for the purposes of this video, I'll be using footage from the 2018 PS4 remake, made by Bluepoint Games. I understand there are some striking differences in the art design compared to the original PS2 game, but it essentially follows the same art enough to the point that it still gets the point across to the player. It was just easier for me to record, considering I don't have a PS3 to record the remaster and the PS5 has a super convenient internal capture card. Bless you, Sony. Now without further ado, my name is Lewis Avery, and here's why the Forbidden Lands are so empty in Shadow of the Colossus. Enjoy. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this game starts out with those fantastically mythical notes from To the Ancient Lands by Ko Otani. I am super sorry if I butchered that name, which immediately sets the tone for the experience which lies ahead. It's going to be a game that will beg the player of their full attention, as well as their commitment. This is evident as by the time this lengthy opening cutscene is done, As soon as you see Wander, a traveler who seems far too big for his horse, carrying a dead woman's corpse through biomes of rocky mountains, forests, and swamps, reaching to an ancient gateway, crossing a long, narrow bridge that somehow has managed to stay upright for the better half of a few millennia, leading to a dilapidated, broken down shrine, surrounded by dead plains, mountains, deserts known only as the Forbidden Lands, you are still pondering as to why. The game does not spoon feature anything about the crux of the plot. In fact, this amazing open cutscene that plays out all the way into the game's main title screen gives you more context about what the player should be expecting than anything else, aside from what's coming up next. This is kind of why I said some of those user reviews were unfair. If they simply watched this opening cutscene alone and fully paid attention to the tone, they would have understood what type of the game this was going to be, and they could have decided if the game was for them or not. That's probably why this cutscene plays before you reach the main menu. The game wanted to give the player the chance to decide whether they were truly prepared to go on this unique journey by simply giving what they needed to know and allow those that were unsure a chance to back out. If you decided to press play after that cutscene, the cutscene that tells you nothing but gives you everything you need to know going in, then that's on the player, not in the game that clearly promised to give you what it just showed you. Look, I know I said this wasn't going to be a bashing of those people, but it really does bug me when people kind of blame these games, movies, whatever, for giving you exactly what it promised you without really taking accountability that it's just not for you. You know, blaming the product rather than being self-aware. It really does bug me. Anyways, you head into this shrine and are greeted by a massive main hall. Sitting along the walls are 16 idols. Wander takes the dead woman's body and places her on an altar at the end of the hall. This moment is meant to serve as the reveal of what Wander was carrying, as before this she couldn't quite tell what he had with him, but I spoiled it for you. Anywho. After seeing this nightmare feel of a face, we transition to a sort of flashback monologue. This is the other major bit of context the player gets, and it specifically discusses the Forbidden Lands. I'll let the scene play out.
Was you hick? Aurel yek for all. Ikudu ibikuka. Yulbzolu iondu. You little cock. I use Yula Cordoloya. Olik, Olazulam, cause. Ilzozeriku at Zoko. Amnos Crudu. Laomism Wop. Was you a Diulas also? Few houses is will. Ikola Kizado you Lola. Islis Pozaiuku. Aumizukikyo. You are la Kwika.
That monologue was given to us by the character of Lord Iman, a character we won't see until much later in the game. In true Shadow of the Colossus class of ambiguous storytelling, his monologue was esoteric. It was pretty cryptic. But it's clear that he's talking about the Forbidden Lands, and here we can truly decipher why the Forbidden Lands are as empty as they are. For one, it's an ancient land. A land built upon by an ancient civilization. You can see this in every Colossi arena you encounter. The structures are old, breaking apart, covered in vegetation, showing their age. Memories replaced by end and not and etched into stone. It's been long theorized what the Forbidden Lands once was before they served to inhabit and imprison the 16 Colossi. Due to the 14th Colossus arena being labeled as a city, many people believe the lands were just that, the location of an ancient society, where vendors traveled from city to city, building and using shrines as checkpoints. That place began from the resonance of intersecting points. No, I personally don't quite believe that. Reason being that each Colossus arena is so specifically designed to help the player defeat it. Take the third Colossus arena for example. Why would an old civilization need a gigantic plain on the middle of a lake bed? Or why would they have another lake bed with a single tower poking out of it? Or an underground catacomb? I understand that these can be explained away as part of the civilization, structures built for religious reasons, but I don't know, in terms of gameplay, they're designed far too conveniently to have these specifically designed to hint at an ancient purpose, and both as a prison for the Colossi. In terms of game design, I get it, but in terms of lore, I'm still leaning on the side they were designed as a prison for the Colossi, rather than have an ancient purpose. I guess that's just my own headcanon though, which is one of the beauties of this game. It is designed with the intention to allow the player to come up with their own version of events. This game kind of inspires me in that aspect, truth be told. If you disagree with me on that, be sure to let me know in the comments. Anywho, from that cryptic monologue given to us by Lord Iman, from assumingly Wander's tribe or society, we're essentially given what we need to know about the Forbidden Lands, from a lore perspective. The place was either founded upon or transformed to serve the purpose of imprisoning 16 separate colossi. Why? as to keep an omnipotent being named Dorman, an entity which can bring back the souls of the dead. Hint, hint. And because of this, trespassing upon the lands is strictly forbidden. Now it's up to the player whether they want to believe the lands were founded upon or transformed, like I said, but it explains why, despite having a variety of biomes, there doesn't seem to be much life. This is something I'll explain further later on in my art direction segment, but for now, that's pretty much all we know, definitively from the context of the story. The lands are abandoned, but not forgotten, left to rot, forbidden upon any outsiders, lest they attempt to bring out a dormant evil sealed away. And should a trespasser ever find himself in these lands, in this case wander, all they'd be met with is danger, death, and extreme isolation. Phew. Gotta give it to Luke Stevens, man. He wasn't caring about how long these take to record. Break. Hey. Like this. Something I made in my spare time. It's kind of a character I'm designing, working on. Might get to see it in the future. Maybe. Possibly. I'm gonna hand this back up now. Hopefully it doesn't fall. Get on there. Anyway. I was going to leave this section for last, but honestly, I feel it'll be easier to talk about it now just coming off the story context. Like I said before, there's a slight difference in comparison between both the PlayStation 2 version and the PlayStation 4 remake that goes beyond the obvious visual upgrade. Many people have argued that in the pursuit to make the Forbidden Lands more photorealistic, Bluepoint Games mistakenly cut out one of the key visual elements of the map: how dead it was. Even though there was still a variety of biomes, it is still the same map after all, each one felt dry and barren, a true representation of an abandoned land. Even the forest areas felt dead, with barely any foliage and a dense fog filling up the air. Compare that to the PlayStation 4 version, yeah, it really seems Bluepoint missed the mark here. They opted to make these areas feel dense with plant life, and that seems to counteract the tone Team Ico was going for. Imagine a sea land where it would seem impossible to live in, filled with harsh environments and a scorching sun, served only to prison the evil that once ruled the land. So, no matter how many biomes there were, even ones where it would seem conceivable to live in, you couldn't. Nothing could. That's why the only animals you see roaming around are hawks, magic lizards, and turtles. Hello! Of course, there is a secret garden atop the shrine, but that place houses its own magical seal, not to mention difficult to reach. Even if someone found their way up there, there are poisonous food that harms the user's health, so I doubt it would be livable. How mono, aggro, and maybe wander, not to mention the other animal life that live exclusively there, can continue existing, I legitimately have no idea. But despite all of that, I don't think Bluepoint completely fucked it up. You see, even if the Forbidden Lands doesn't feel exactly how it was in the original PS2 port, they're still able to define the Forbidden Lands with their photorealistic visual style. In fact, in the areas they got right, they only enhanced how sealed the lands felt. For every bit of lively foliage, there was still a scorching desert under bright sunlight that never seemed to end. For every beautiful waterfall, there was still a hazardous geyser field, reeking of hydrogen sulfide and rotten eggs. The swamp area directly under the forest I talked about actually looks a lot better in the remake than in the original. They knew what they were doing. They wanted the Forbidden Lands to look like they'd been lost to time, where areas have been overcome with natural erosion and overgrown vegetation. Even though the forest areas feel denser with plant life, they don't seem to get in the way of making the lands feel deserted. It almost makes it feel a bit eerie in some places, in fact. For example, take the pathway to 12's arena. You enter a beautiful looking forest, filled with ancient trees and a pretty waterfall. When you walk in, it feels peaceful at first. But then you look around. You notice just how alone you are. You explore the little crevices and you find a piece of shrine just buried in the ground. Out of all the shrines in the game, why is this one just sitting here? There's one just outside this area too, why is this here? That can be said for nearly every area in the game. Strange structures plague the lands, leaving behind an ancient mystery. There's the shrines like I talked about, but there's also hidden temples like the one in the first Colossus arena, which you might not have noticed in fact. I actually didn't know that temple was there until long after I'd gotten into the game. I always thought this big guy's arena was just an opening in the mountains, but there is a man-made pathway leading to the area, so there are some clues. Quite famously amongst the community are the strange rings at 13's arena. There's so many of them awkwardly placed, not clearly serving a purpose. But then you notice that 13, during his flight path, avoids these rings, so they must serve some purpose. I actually recommend Nomadic Colossus' video on this, as he provides a lot more detail than I can already give in his packed video. He's also one of the leading members in the Shadow of Colossus community that scavenges the game files for clues and mysteries. It's really interesting. So while the Forbidden Lands are empty, that's not to say they're not packed with details for the player to come across while they're exploring. This is what I meant when I said there wasn't anything overtly interesting about the game's map, at least not when you're talking about conventional open world games. The game isn't stacked with clearly indicated landmarks that are begging the player to come check them out. The developers clearly sprinkle in details around the map for the players to naturally come across, should they choose to ignore the main campaign for a bit and wander around. Furthermore, most of these areas are in locations that the player never visits, should they shoot through the main story. The southwest side of the map is mostly left untouched by the campaign, but there are little secrets over there. Mainly a few shrines and some fruit, but there's some unique rock formations and cliff sides that just leave you in awe. It really gives you the feeling that this place is a magical land, and maybe you shouldn't be here. Maybe the lands are better off left alone. With every Colossus you kill, you feel like you're causing an irreparable disruption. And it's made clear by the shining pillars of light emanating from the corpses of the Colossi you've killed so far. Once again, emphasizing that as abandoned the lands are, there's still some magical force emanating from within it. The remnants of a final breath from a long dead land. Bluepoint may have flubbed up the art style a little bit in the remake, but across the board, the Forbidden Lands are filled with mysteries in a variety of environments. Each landmark speaks to the player, the ghost of its past haunting them with every step, the near unlivable terrain with dry lands expanding for miles, with few and very far between spots where it may seem one could live. When researching and taking notes of this video, I described the Forbidden Lands as if it was designed to kill you. And aside from the obvious colossi that guard the segmented souls of Dormine, I don't think I was 100% right. I'd say it's more designed to imprison you. It is in fact a prison for Dormine themselves, but the terrain here is uniquely built to entrap any trespassers too. Hence, when you are finally able to climb up the shrine, cross the bridge that is the length of half the map itself, and finally reach the gate you had entered at the beginning of the game, you're met by strong winds, pushing you back in. There are mysteries left behind by the ancients, further adding to the vagueness of this game's story and lore, while also creating a unique visual look for the world itself. This is actually why the Shadow of the Colossus community is still alive and well today, 15 years later after the game's initial release. So, while it's seemingly empty the lands are, the developers were very delicate with how they crafted this world. It is abandoned and has aged over the course of possibly 1,000 years, but it is rich with its mysteries. Before I get into this next segment, I just want to thank everybody who's made it this far into the video. I know it's been quite long, but I really wanted to make a video that wasn't a full critique, but was a retrospective analysis of a game that I'm passionate about a topic of a game I'm passionate about. I could talk for hours about Shadow of the Colossus. I can talk about it for literally hours. And we all have those things that we're all passionate about, that we can talk for hours and we can delve deep into and never get bored of it. And this is what Shadow of the Colossus is to me. This is what the Forbidden Lands is to me. And this is one idea out of 3. And I chose Shadow of the Colossus because it was actually the quickest one I can condense down into a short amount of time. Which is saying a lot. But seriously, if you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe. I may do some more of this in the future. This is always the video I've always wanted to make. Type of video I want to make. I always want to do these retrospectives. I always want to do critiques. So if you're interested, please subscribe. But yeah, I've delayed this video long enough, so let's get into the final segment. The player experience. As a player, there's few things you immediately notice when roaming the Forbidden Lands. The calm winds, the dirt getting kicked up as your horse gallops through the empty plains, a hawk or two riding by you, making a perfect cinematic shot. But most importantly, you notice silence. There's no music. Throughout your entire time exploring the Forbidden Lands and between Colossi battles, there's zero non-diegetic sound accompanying your journey. Not even a slight tune. Much like what other open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, Psychonauts 2, or the plethora of open world games that have released over the years. The game purposely forces you to sit alone without the aid of the soundtrack, opting for organic ambience to enhance your experience, not take away from it. It perfectly adds to the tone too. The entirety of this game's minimalistic style is all for the purpose of introspection. Once you kill a Colossus, return to the Shrine of Worship and are sent back out by Dormine to kill another Colossus, you travel large distances in between each boss, accompanied by the organic ambience. It was the developer's intention that, within that time, Players would reflect on their journey, their goal, and their morality. Why am I killing these Colossi? How do I feel about it? Aren't they innocent? Is it all worth it? Team Ico wanted the player to enter an uncomfortable zone during these segments of the game. Typically, games are an escape from these thoughts. They allow us to enter a new realm and hold new possibilities designed to relieve us from real-world stress and worries. A high schooler who are overwhelmed by deadlines and exams may find some time to hop in Minecraft to build a house, go mining, or hunt some mobs as a way to forget about those worries. An office worker with an overbearing boss may go home and jump into GTA 5 and cause some carnage as a form of catharsis for their anger. Shadow of the Colossus instead tries to encourage the player to get into that zone, to really consider their motivations for killing 16 creatures who, at the time, were just minding their own business. Red Dead Redemption 2 actually does something similar. In a test performed by Luke Stevens, he determined the amount of game time it took for a world event to grab the player's attention, a moment of interest, was about 80 seconds, which was longer than the average 20 seconds within a typical Ubisoft-style open-world game. This was done with the intent to further immerse the player into the game world, to encourage them to find reason to engage with the world the same way the characters who inhabited it did, to essentially place them within their boots or what have you. In the case of Shadow of the Colossus, this technique is pulled off in a much similar way. Team Ico knew that the Forbidden Lands wasn't going to have any side activities or other points of interest that would intentionally pull the player away from its main story, its main themes. So instead they use this to their advantage to encourage the player to perform some introspective, see how they relate to Wander and his quest, if killing 16 Colossi is really worth the price we can already sense is going to be paid. And later most certainly does, as we learned during the game's ending that Dorme was just using Wander's vulnerability to regain all 16 spliced segments of their soul back so they may return. That's what these individual moments are all leading up to. Players remain invested through the fun boss battles, anticipating what's to come next, what form the next Colossi was going to take, how challenging and different it was going to be compared to the previous, immersing themselves through the game's visual art style, the story presented so far. But in these moments, traveling across dead plains, deserts, humid forests, they're also forced to take time and reflect on their journey thus far, the story and the consequences yet to come. Of course, Team Ico also knew this type of hefty tone would be discouraging if they had left the player alone in the world. Wander needed a companion that the player could bond with to help lift the weight of the story, so that is why they included the horse who I cannot believe I've gone this long without mentioning,
Agro! 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 Agro!
Agro. She's your only true companion throughout the game, also servicing as the game's main traversal mechanic. Over the course of the game, each player will form their own unique bonds with Agro, not only when traveling the Forbidden Lands, but also during boss battles as some Colossi require Agro to beat them. She serves as an anchor that keeps the player hooked, and allows them to soak all their emotions into, further indulging themselves into the world. And in the case of the Forbidden Lands, she serves as the one reliable thing that the player can latch onto. The lands may be about emphasizing the feeling of isolation, but without that connection to her, the game will be on the brink of sufferable. You can't have this large of a game specifically designed to pressure you without an aiding companion to help alleviate the pressing number of emotions the player must be going through. Agro is the antithesis to all that, and in a funny contrast, makes you feel more alien in this world. As the player rides through the Forbidden Lands, they may often rely on Agro as that anchor, and Team Ico knew this. They gave Agro her own personality that the player could subconsciously recognize and identify with to keep them engaged. I pointed this out earlier in the video, but have you noticed that Agro is quite a large horse? So big in fact that Wander looks tiny in comparison? This was a deliberate choice by Team Ico to create a subtle relationship, not only to Wander and Agro, but for the player too. It may also hint to some possible lore. Did Wander steal Agro from his tribe to go on this quest? Does it hint to Wander's inherent stubbornness, as Agro herself could be quite stubborn too, making an unlikely duo? Who knows? Furthermore, it is with Agro that the player asks themselves one of the key questions regarding the Forbidden Lands. What happened? I covered this partly in my art direction segment, but the Forbidden Lands are rich with secrets to explore and discover, remnants of its past that beg the question of how the lands came to be. The player questions this as the camera pans out to witness the vast landscape as they ride across them with Agro, adding a cinematic yet isolated feel. These are the moments of interest the game presents to the player. They're not random encounters with an NPC or side missions. It's just a subtle pullback of the camera, allowing the player to take in the vastness of the lands and make them beg the question, what happened? Back when I saw the Zuzi reviews in 2018, I couldn't help but feel baffled. Asylum is ridiculous, pompous, arrogant. I can understand why they're so angry. There's certainly stuff I could agree with. The controls make me feel like a playing Twister with the finger sometimes. The camera was god-awful. Trust me, I had issues with it trying to record this video. But I so desperately wanted to tell everyone, of course there's no NPCs, of course there's no game vendors, of course the map is big and empty. The game is trying to take you on a specific journey that's unlike any other game out there. It tells its story through its art, and every other design choice reflects that. But of course, over time, I matured, and I came to realize that this game doesn't speak to everyone. No game can. The people who left those comments are more likely the kind of players that expect more from video games that simply Shadow of Colossus doesn't offer. They want mad stories, they want action-packed content, they want a densely packed world with stuff to do and things to see. And while there's certainly elements of that in Shadow of Colossus, it's not to the conventional style that the games that these people would typically offer. The game presents a world full of mysteries, an untold story begging to be uncovered, but never giving definite clues to always keep players on their toes. It helped define a form of storytelling, one that doesn't spoon-feed all the details. It keeps things vague and ambiguous for the player to discover themselves, to form their own interpretations and share with other members of the community, to go back and forth and work together to uncover a deeper mystery. Some of you may even know this game is infamous for having those types of mysteries. Think back to the 17th Colossus, a mystery that lasted years and saw pitch effort by the entire community to connect dots, perform unthinkable ways to try and uncover this mythical 17th Colossus, only for that hope to be discarded when other members of the community, like Nomad Colossus, who I mentioned earlier, came in and proved there was no 17th Colossus. But what he did do is he proved that the game had held more mysteries within the game's files. I didn't even get to mention the 8-beta Colossus and how they would have fit into the Forbidden Lands. All of this, the story, the world, the nuances, the mysteries, are why I love this game. So, to definitively answer the question why the Forbidden Lands so empty, it's because they are rich with the secrets and mysteries of a past long forgotten. Because Team Ico wanted to design a world that was not only unconventional for games at the time, but one that helped reflect the morality of the central character you play as, and convey consequences of the mistakes of the greedy, vulnerable, and unwise. To present a video game that proved the game maps didn't have to contain a plethora of distracting side content and activities, and rather had a focused art style that reflected the story and lore within it. It's for these reasons that Shadow of Colossus will forever stick with me. It's for these reasons that it still stands tall on the list of my personal favorite games of all time. It's a game I revisit rarely, as I want each experience to be as fresh as possible. And when I do, I take my time, taking in each scenery and engrossing myself in the mysteries of the Forbidden Lands.